whilst a cooler feel for Scotland, Northern Ireland, western parts of England and Wales, with clearer spells expected. But the wet weather in the southeast continues during the morning. Could be some tricky conditions on the roads for a time before eventually it eases away. Some useful wet weather, of course. We do need the rain in the southeast. Further showers follow, but eventually brighter skies. And for many, it's a fine afternoon. Temperatures closer to average, a fresher feel, but a breeze there for western Scotland and Northern Ireland, cloudier with some showers. Some more prolonged rain into the west of Northern Ireland, Western Isles during the evening, but clear skies for much of England, Wales, eastern Scotland, and more comfortable night for sleeping, I think, with temperatures most places dipping into the low double figures rather than the high teens. And there will be some showers pushing into western and southwestern Scotland, Northern Ireland, West Wales and the southwest first thing Friday. Sunny spells elsewhere, and for, say, central and eastern parts of England, it's a largely dry and sunny day. Northwest Scotland also sees mostly fine conditions. Showers in between, especially for southern Scotland. Drier and brighter this weekend.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GBNews.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, Patrick Christie's here. I'm in for Colin Brazier, and it's great to see you all again. I've been away for about a month or so, but it's great to be back on what is a bumper news day. So let's make up for lost time, shall we, and get stuck right in. Records, records, records in the channel. The total number of migrants landing in the UK has topped a whopping 23,000 already this year. There were more arrivals yesterday than ever before. I am sick and tired of people insisting that they're all refugees, that they're all asylum seekers. Many of them simply are not. And it's time we clamp down on illegal economic migration. I'll be doing a monologue on that very, very shortly. And now, the French have piped up again, haven't they? Yes, that's nice of them, claiming that we owe them 8 million big ones for their, quote, attempts to patrol beaches and stop migrants coming. Surely they're taking the mickey. They've shown about as much resistance as they did during the Second World War. Should we pay? I say no. Also this hour, she's back by unpopular demand.
I don't ever remember personally feeling the negative connotation behind the word ambitious until I started dating my now husband.
Someone passed me the sick bucket. Yes, that's right. She's put the M and indeed the E in Meghan Markle. She talks about her ambition in her new long-awaited exclusive Archetypes podcast series with Spotify, which made me just want to walk into the sea and then keep on going. Meghan had the chance to interview powerhouse Serena Williams about female ambition, smashing down gender boundaries and overcoming adversity. Instead, she just spoke about herself, giggled a bit and wheeled out Prince Harry like a simpering idiot. I'll ask a psychotherapist whether Meghan Markle is a full-blown narcissist. Also, the manhunt is on for the depraved gun-toting killer who tragically shot a child to death in Liverpool. Police, the media and indeed the nation, the entire nation, are begging those who know the shooter to turn this vile thug in. If you're watching this, do the right thing. What on earth is happening as law and disorder reigns in broken Britain? And 70% of pubs could disappear this winter. You heard, 70% of pubs. They're saying they can't survive without government help as the cost of living crisis hits hard. With me for the next 2 hours, it's a man who pulls no punches. It's the former editor of The Sun. It's the one and only Kelvin McKenzie. I tell you what, there's a lot for Kelvin to tee off there. His eyes lit up when he heard the words French. Anyway, there we are. Strap yourselves in, ladies and gentlemen, because I'm back with a bang right here on GB News. I've reached the end of my tether with this Channel Migrant nonsense. I'll be teeing off on that in just a few moments. But first, it's your latest headlines with the wonderful Tatiana Sanchez.
Thank you, Patrick. Good afternoon. It is 4 minutes past 4. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. Boris Johnson has made a surprise visit to the Ukraine's capital to mark the country's Independence Day. Speaking with his Ukrainian counterpart, Volodymyr Zelensky, in Kyiv, the Prime Minister said he believes Ukraine can and will win this war. Mr. Johnson's visit to the war-torn country comes as it also marks 6 months since the Russian invasion began. The two leaders have held a joint briefing where he said now's not the time for what he calls a flimsy plan for negotiation with Russia.
I want to remind you, Volodymyr, that when you rang me at 4 o'clock in the morning on that grim day in February, and you told me the news that we had been dreading, that Putin had been so insane as to invade a sovereign European country, I told you then that we were shoulder to shoulder with you, and that is as true today as it was in that horrific moment.
The States has announced an aid package to Ukraine worth more than £2.5 billion. President Joe Biden says the funding will allow Ukraine to acquire weapons, air defence systems and radars to defend itself for years to come. The 35-year-old man suspected of being the target of a shooting in Liverpool which killed a 9-year-old girl has been named by newspapers as convicted burglar Joseph Nee. Merseyside police earlier confirmed he'll be questioned in connection with the murder of Olivia Pratt-Corbell. His arrest is for breaching the terms of his release from prison. Officers are urging anyone with information relating to the shooting to come forward. Auxiliary Bishop of Liverpool, Thomas Williams, explains the impact it's had on the community.
This would galvanise, I think, people, to get them. I think that we are totally united in this, in every single way, by the horror of it. The biggest problem, I think, is fear, and that's what people are highlighting now. If people are afraid, what they're afraid of, and the problem is we're very often afraid of the unknown. When things like this happen, it's too real.
Meanwhile, in London, police investigating the shooting of an 18-year-old man have offered a £20,000 reward for information about his murder. Newly released CCTV footage shows a car involved in the shooting of Alex Ayanaku, who died nearly 1 year ago. A new appeal for information comes amid a wave of violent crimes in the capital. More than 23,000 people have crossed the English Channel in small boats this year, more than double the number at the same time last year. GB News has learned another 500 migrants made the crossing today, with more boats coming in this afternoon. It follows a record day on Monday, which saw nearly 1,300 make the journey in 27 small boats. It's the highest daily total since current records began 4 years ago. Ofgem has been challenged by Scotland's Children's Commissioner over the decision to raise the energy price cap. Bruce Adamson's written to the industry regulator about the potential impact of a cap increase. He's warning more families will be pushed into poverty this winter. Ofgem will make its latest announcement on Friday, with experts forecasting average annual bills will increase to more than £3,500. Mountain biker Rab Wardell has died just 2 days after winning the Scottish Cross Country Championship. The 37-year-old suffered a cardiac arrest and died in his sleep yesterday. Mr. Wardell won the elite's men's title on Sunday. His partner, Olympic gold medalist Katie Archibald, has revealed she tried to resuscitate him and has posted an emotional statement online confirming his death. Bin strikes seen in Edinburgh in recent days are expected to grow as refuse collectors at 13 Scottish local authorities plan to walk out. Bin workers from cities including Glasgow, Dundee and Aberdeen will join their colleagues in Edinburgh in taking industrial action. Trade unions were offered a 5% pay rise, but a deal was not reached. Rubbish has been piling up in the Scottish capital since the strike started last Thursday, and they aren't expected to end for another week. Princess Diana's much-loved Ford Escort is due to be auctioned this weekend at Silverstone. The car, driven by Princess Diana in the late 1980s, is thought to be one of a kind, the only RS Turbo Series 1 in black. It's expected to fetch more than £100,000. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Brazier with Patrick Christie's.
Britain is committing national suicide. Our failure to get to grips with what is happening in the Channel is a disgrace. The bleeding heart Liberal brigade might think that they're being kind, loving and morally good by saying that we should let any Tom, Dick and Harry in across the Channel, but they're actually helping to send this country to the dogs. They are propping up violent crime, organised gangs, costing the taxpayer tens of millions of pounds, contributing to the housing crisis and, of course, putting our national security at risk to boot. Just before I came on air, in fact, the news broke that the number of people crossing the English Channel in small boats has now topped 23,000 for the year. 500 migrants have arrived so far today, and Monday was yet another record day with 1,295 lucky people setting foot on our south coast. Estimates indicate that around 60% of those are, in fact, Albanian. That's the same Albania that hasn't seen a conflict for more than 25 years, is a NATO ally and wants to join the European Union. So, if they're not fleeing war or persecution and they arrive here on a dinghy, what does that make them then? Well, in my book, that makes them illegal economic migrants. And in fact, all too often, they become doubly illegal pretty quickly. They get here illegally and then some engage in illegal activity when they get off the boat. An Albanian immigration source even admitted that many of the new arrivals join organised drug gangs so they can pay off the £5,000 they pay to people smugglers, who, you guessed it, are reportedly predominantly Albanian themselves. In fact, some of them don't even wait to get involved in the black market before they start to commit a crime. Lucy Morton, who represents Border Force staff, said in the last week that 2 staff have been attacked and 3 have even been bitten. Yes, bitten. Does anybody else find the sheer number of young single men coming across the Channel absolutely remarkable? The Home Office revealed that around 90% of arrivals in 2021 were in fact male. Isn't this strange though? Just have a look at what's happening in Ukraine at the moment. That's a real war, isn't it? It's the women and the children who are fleeing and the men who are staying. I spoke to a former SAS soldier on Monday who's just got back from Ukraine, and he told me that there are entire towns over there where it's predominantly men, in fact, entirely men, actually, preparing to defend their country. But presumably, if you go to Albania, the opposite is true. It's just town after town of women waving pitchforks and handguns at an imaginary enemy. I am sick and tired of being gaslit by a liberal mob who are telling us that every day, everybody coming over the Channel is a refugee or an asylum seeker, and that if you don't believe that, well, then you are a frothing racist. No, I've had enough of it. Facts are facts. And the fact is that Britain is there for the taking. Our asylum policy is being exploited by human traffickers who are importing thousands of economic migrants who cost the taxpayer millions of pounds in legal fees, clog up the social housing system, now even the lower end of the private rental market as well, increase the burden on our public services and, in some cases, join violent, organised crime gangs. In my opinion, many of the people who like to virtue signal about, well, refugees welcome and call anyone who wants tougher border controls a racist are, in fact, dangerous, hypocritical fantasists. If someone knocks on the door of their leafy home county's detached house, oh, hello, I live down the road, actually, in a much worse house than you, but I like your house and I'd like to live here now. Well, they wouldn't let them in, would they? Of course they wouldn't. If someone knocks on their door and says, oh, here we go. Hi there, hi. I won't tell you who I am or where I'm from, but I'm asking you to just believe me when I say that I need to live here now in your house for my own safety. Well, they'd say no, wouldn't they? And yet they want this country to say yes. The irony is that clamours for an open-door policy, which is essentially basically what we've got now, isn't it, in the Channel, means that there might actually be less space for genuine refugees and asylum seekers. So it's completely self-defeating. I've had enough, frankly, of being told there are just two types of people in this country when it comes to what's happening in the Channel. Bad people who want tighter controls and good people who want to let everybody in. From where I'm sitting, there is absolutely nothing good whatsoever about endangering your national security, fueling organised crime and increasing the burden on already struggling taxpayers. Yes, absolutely. Well, those are my views, of course. I do want to hear from you. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Keep those emails flooding in. We are the People's Channel. I want to hear from you. I'll be going to my inbox, which I've got right in front of me here, throughout the show, so don't be shy. But let's get reaction to the number of migrants crossing the Channel to the UK this year, passing £23,000. Shortly, I'm going to be going to my main man for the day, who's sat near me, Kelvin McKenzie. He's going to be discussing the fact, of course, as his eyes lit up there, the idea that the French are demanding that we give them £8 million for essentially not patrolling the beaches in Calais. You've heard those facts. 23,000 people have slipped through the net. It's hardly a stone wall, is it? But I am joined now by the former Director General of the UK Border Force. It's Tony Smith, CBE. Tony, thank you very much for joining me. Now, the big line for me in this, look, we know that literally boatloads of migrants are coming here all the time. We know that a lot of them are not being sent back. But now it appears that Border Force staff are coming under violent threats. What do you know?
Yes, I'm afraid they are, Patrick, you're right. We are seeing, I'm hearing of more hostility by some of the later cohorts, more recent cohorts of migrants coming across the Channel. It is making it quite difficult and dangerous for Border Force officers, immigration enforcement officers to process them, because there is more hostility, I think, towards the uniform now than there has been in the past. So it's an additional worry that, in trying to protect border security, trying to protect the country, the Border Force, immigration enforcement pretty well disempowered from detaining and removing people, as you said in your report, for a variety of reasons, but nonetheless still trying to make sure that we do apply proper screening measures. But the sheer volume and the increased hostility of some of the cohorts is a concern.
Yeah, I mean, being bitten by someone who's just got off a boat, being attacked by someone who's just got off a boat. I mean, you're already copping it left, right and centre. To be fair, Border Force at times, potentially some would say unfairly, has copped it from people like me who's begged the question, what are you doing? But yeah, if our government isn't going to stand up and protect the rights of people in this country, if it isn't going to get its act together when it comes to, dealing with the burden on our housing stock or with our public services, at least maybe it might step in and do something when it comes to people like yourself being bitten.
Yeah, and I think, Patrick, that's why it's quite valuable that you and and others raise some of these issues that aren't being raised necessarily in other media channels about, firstly, the numbers. I don't hear very much of a debate about upper numbers, but if we are talking about being a country that welcomes refugees, this government has done a huge amount in Afghanistan, in Syria, in Hong Kong and in Ukraine to welcome numbers. But we haven't really had the debate about what is an acceptable, tolerable number of illegal migrants or irregular migrants coming in. And it was 25,000 on Monday. It's now creeping up to 50, 60, 70,000. Where do you draw the line? And when do we reach that threshold when public concern has reached such a stage that you are then raising these questions of how do we accommodate, integrate these numbers of people, bearing in mind some of them may well be genuine refugees, but even then, what capacity do we have to cater for these numbers? Because we haven't seen an increased resources, border force enforcement, or anywhere else really for that matter, to deal with it.
No, we haven't, and you've hit the nail right on the head. It's almost like we planned this, actually, Tony, because that's my next question. The figures keep on coming when it comes to the amount of illegal economic migrants. We've seen a massive increase, it would appear, in Albanians coming over. This is according to reports, of course. Albanians, by the way, in this country, make up the larger percentage of foreign criminals in our system. We've even had an Albanian immigration officer telling us, just openly telling us, that a lot of these people are coming over here with the express intent of working in organised crime, drug dealing, that leads to violent crime, etc. But yeah, you end up with these bleeding heart liberals with an EU bumper sticker and a glass of Chablis in their Hampstead mansion or whatever, telling us that we need to throw our arms around the world. How many of these people coming here on these boats, in your opinion, are actually asylum seekers and refugees? Because if they're not, surely it's just illegal immigration.
So you need to look at the nationality cohorts, really, and understand how the asylum system works. People will claim for different reasons. So, for example, people from Iran, Iraq may come here and then say they'll face religious persecution because they've become Christians when they've got here. Eritreans will come here and say, well, I evaded military service to leave my country. You can't send me back there. I'll be persecuted. There are lots of different ways that cases that people put forward as to why they can't be returned to their own country, Patrick. And even then, when those cases are refused, some of those countries will not accept asylum seekers back. So we've lost the capacity to return some of the cohorts to their own country. But you mentioned Albania, which is really interesting because you're right. They're not claiming asylum, actually. This is a different MO. But what they are claiming, Patrick, is to be victims of trafficking. And there is something called the National Referrals Mechanism for victims of trafficking, where we are obliged to refer people if they say, I'm being trafficked or coerced into all this. That takes it again out of the hands of the border force. It goes to a third party to look at. That third party is overwhelmed. We don't have the power to detain them whilst that process is ongoing. And so what's happening is the actual enforcement of our laws at our borders have been taken away systematically by immigration officers, which I used to exercise, when we just send people straight back, actually, if they don't have the right papers to enter this country. And you're right, people are seeing this kind of ferry service across the channel as a way to...
Tony. We're there for the taking. I'm going to have to end it there, I'm afraid, Tony. Great to have you on. We'll have to have you back on soon. Tony Smith, CBE, former Director General of UK Border Force. Now, despite the figures suggesting that France aren't doing a particularly good job of stopping migrants leaving their beaches in small boats to cross the UK, those figures suggest it because those figures are true, and indeed the French aren't, it seems that they're now claiming that Britain owes them £8 million for their beach patrols. Well, just last week, GBNews brought you exclusive footage of the tactics used by people trafficking gangs against police on the French beaches. In fact, you can see them on your TV there. If you're listening to us on radio, turn the telly off. But now, a diplomatic row has, of course, broken out with the local authority in Calais, suggesting the UK hasn't coughed up the promised cash. I'm just going to get straight now to Kelvin McKenzie, who's joining me in the studio throughout the show, former editor of The Sun. Kelvin, do we owe the French a penny?
Well, can I just deal with one of Tony Smith's good points there? First of all, do you realise the way that this audience, the numbers are going? We're 50 or 60,000 at the end of this year. Do you know what that represents in terms of our towns? Durham, 50-odd thousand. Bognor-on-Sea, 50 or 60,000. How are we supposed to cope with these kinds of numbers? We can't even cope. Currently, everybody's shouting out we're poor because of inflation and because of energy. Where are we supposed to get the money to feed and pay these people anyway? It's got completely out of control. So Border Force actually are now saying about the French, by the way, that the reason why this huge number is coming in August, why? Because in France, the police officers go on holiday, right? And therefore, there is nobody there actually now to actually police these coastal towns, which is a load of cobblers, because what happened to the other 20,000 when it was the rest of the year, right? Between now...
no, because what happened there, Kelvin, is they were on their lunch break.
They were
on their lunch break, and then there was a nice baguette, and there was a bit of time, wasn't there, earlier in the year, but of coururse they were on strike then.
They were.
Absolutely. But, no, seriously, you're right, we'd have to rebuild like the city of Milton Keynes.
But Durham, you know, Clacton, Bognor, these are all 50,000 towns, and we are allowing them in. Not only this year, presumably, if you listen to what Tony Smith said, any kind of people can come here. At some stage, somebody, it's not going to be Sunak, it's not going to be Truss, I don't know who the hell it's going to be. It wasn't Cameron, and it wasn't May. And by the way, I think we're all agreed it can't be Starmer. Who is going to say we are going to push them back? And yes, there might be difficulties of a political nature. Right? Who is going to...
Well, no one.
Which politician... And if not, how many times are you going to be saying what you're saying from that chair?
I've read out on GB News record daily figures about 15 times. I've been sat here doing this and I've read it out. Today's a record day in the Channel. Today's a record day in the Channel. You could clip that bit of me saying that and just play it over and over again every day.
Have you come across any politician or anybody who has had a solution to which either you agree with or thought, that's not a bad point? I mean, what would Tony Smith's answer be? What would your answer be? Until somebody says, I have an answer and it has a penalty to us, something rather horrible might happen, right? Supposing it did happen, how would we deal with that?
Yeah, I agree with you, although Priti Patel's wave machine is now starting to look rather good, isn't it, despite the fact that it was laughed at.
I thought you meant a weighing machine, actually.
Well, it's a daytime show, Kelvin. Right now, there's one story, of course. We're moving on now. It's a bit of a shift in tone, this, ladies and gentlemen. There's one story which has been dominating the headlines today, making almost all of the front pages this morning. It's that tragic death of 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell, who was shot as her mother struggled with two men, one armed with a gun, at the door of her Liverpool home on Monday night. A manhunt is underway for the gunman, with some calling Britain's streets lawless. A striking front page from the Liverpool Echo with a direct message to anyone who may have information. It asks them simply, whose side are you on, is the call. Of course, that is in relation to the fact that the person believed to be responsible for this is, as far as we're aware, still at large, presumably anyway, being looked after by someone, being hidden by someone, and that's what that call is all about. If you are watching this, which I doubt, to be fair, but if you are, whose side are you on? Do you want that entire city and indeed the entire nation against you? I suspect not. Well, this morning, police did arrest the man who was targeted by the gunman in the shooting. So not the gunman himself, the man who was supposed to be the target. And we can hear from GB News' North West reporter, it's Sophie Reaper, who's been in Liverpool, and she has the latest for us.
Merseyside police have now arrested Joseph Nee, 35-year-old convicted burglar who was being pursued by a gunman who ultimately shot and killed Olivia Pratt-Corbell on Monday night here in Liverpool. We've been told he's been arrested for breaching the terms of his release from prison, and he will now be questioned in connection with Olivia's murder. This morning we've seen forensic teams down this street behind me collecting evidence from in front of one of the properties, and this is all part of the murder investigation that Merseyside police have launched to find the perpetrator behind the murder that has rocked the nation. Earlier I asked the Auxiliary Bishop of Liverpool, Tom Williams, about the mood in the local community.
The reality of life is that when life hits hard like this situation, it will strengthen a lot of people, you know. The biggest problem, I think, is fear, and that's what people are highlighting now. If people are afraid, what they're afraid of. And the problem is we're very often afraid of the unknown. When things like this happen, it's too real.
Speaking to local residents here yesterday, they told us that this is a very tight-knit community, and they agreed with the family when they said they will do absolutely whatever it takes to find Olivia's killer. Now, there's usually the understanding of grass culture here in this region, but the police have said there is absolutely no time for this. This is not the time to be tight-lipped, and they will leave no stone unturned to find the murderer of Olivia Pratt-Corbell.
Yes, thank you very, very much for that, Sophie. Sophie Reaper there, GB News' North West reporter. Now, little Olivia's death follows a spate of murders across the UK, of course, and youth violence, once again, is at the heart of cities. A video from Nottingham has gone viral online, which shows a group of youths storming a McDonald's restaurant in the city centre, jumping over the counter, looting it, essentially. Now, police say that up to 50 people, thought to be aged between 14 and 16, abused and threatened staff. So what is it, right, that's causing youth violence? Tyson Fury's cousin, of course, stabbed to death in the neck in Altrincham recently. Well, frankly, I mean, you just have to open the newspaper on any given day, and what we're seeing now is stabbings, shootings, and all too often the victims and all too often the perpetrators are indeed young men. Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, or Sadiq Khan, as I like to call him, blamed the weather. Now, I suppose that's convenient for him, but I wonder whether or not it could be a lack of male role models for young men. Is it a problem that starts at home? And my next guest is a former teacher and master at Eton College. You'll remember this guy, OK? I've been looking forward to getting him on the channel. He was fired by a school, Eton to be fair, over a lecture in which he highlighted the importance of masculine virtues and challenged feminist criticisms of masculinity in a move which was widely criticised as a suppression of free speech. Thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. It's Will Nolan. Will, thank you. Look, when it comes to this, I'm sick and tired of a lot of things today, but I'm sick and tired especially of people blaming things like, oh, the weather's nice. Well, why are they outside with a knife? Go and have a pint in the park. What's going on? Does the problem start at home? Is there a lack of strong male role models that leads to people picking up a knife and using it on the street, or indeed a gun?
Yeah, there's research showing that one of the main functions of a father in the home is to provide boundaries, not just emotional boundaries, and fatherlessness is linked to ADHD, but also discipline as well. And if you don't have that strong male role model in the home, then it's easy for you to lose a sense of what being a man is, and you seek it in machismo and bravado instead, and hence the attraction of gang culture for many of these young men.
And do you, as far as you're concerned, you think there is obviously a direct correlation between essentially fatherless homes and what we're seeing in terms of knife crime, gun crime, gang crime? And do you think that that sense of a role model being missing means that essentially, actually, they're very scared and they carry a knife because they think that it might make them hard, and they try to impress some of the older boys, and a way to do that is essentially to stab someone to death?
I think it's partly fear, but it's also to do with the craving for status and honor. And if you are in a school system, for example, which tells you that everything about masculinity is bad, and you still feel this innate need to display the qualities that have been chosen by women in sexual selection across centuries, you want to show off strength, you want to show off honor, courage, determination, then the gang atmosphere can provide a forum for that. It's just not where we want to direct young boys. We want them to show those qualities in defense of women, in defense of children, as they've traditionally been valued.
Just very quickly, because I'm going to get shouted at, Will, OK? I'm good. Very quickly. Sorry. Do you think, though, that the situation's changing? Because you tried to express certain things about well, basically pretty much similar to what you just said there, right? And you were massively disciplined for it, dragged through the press for it. I mean, even with a male role model these days, I mean, you might end up with Prince Harry, for goodness sake.
Well, you could do, but the data is that fatherlessness is very strongly correlated with all the problems that we're seeing now. And if we can return to an environment where young boys are taught the importance of the traditional virtues at home first, and they're given boundaries, then the father modeling that behavior is the best way for them to learn.
Indeed. Look, Will, thank you very, very much. Great to have you on. I'm sorry it was a bit short and sweet, that, but you know how the news is at times. It's rolling and it gets away from us. We'll have to have you back on. I want you back on very soon. Well done for fighting the good fight, my man there. Will Nolan, of course, who I suppose shot to fame, you could say, infamy, some would say, when he gave a speech to a load of boys at Eton School, essentially talking about the virtues of manhood and role models, etc. And of course, naturally, you can't do that in this day and age. The world's gone mad, hasn't it? But anyway, you're watching and listening to me, Patrick Christie's, in for Colin Brazier for the rest of this week. Emails flying in thick and fast. I haven't forgot about you. GBviews at gbnews.uk. I'll be going to them very, very shortly. Loads of good ones, especially when it comes to what's been going on in the channel. But today marks 6 months since Russia invaded Ukraine in what it continues to refer to as a special military operation. GB News' very own Home and Security editor Mark White has been reflecting on the conflict. He'll join me next. Do not miss that. I will be back in a tick.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good afternoon. It is 4:33. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB Newsroom. Boris Johnson has made a surprise visit to Ukraine's capital to mark the country's Independence Day. Speaking with his Ukrainian counterpart, Volodymyr Zelensky, in Kyiv, the Prime Minister said he believes Ukraine can and will win this war. On his last visit to the war-torn country before leaving office, Mr Johnson set out a further £54 million package of military aid and vowed the UK will continue to stand with Ukraine.
And I see the Ukrainian flag flying here. You will see it also in the streets of London, in villages, in towns across the whole of the UK. And my essential message for you today is that that support for your struggle to keep your independence is indivisible and will remain whatever happens in UK politics.
The man suspected of being the target of a shooting in Liverpool which killed a 9-year-old girl has been named by newspapers as convicted burglar Joseph Nee. Merseyside police earlier confirmed the 35-year-old will be questioned in connection with the murder of Olivia Pratt-Corbell. His arrest is for breaching the terms of his release from prison. Officers are urging anyone with information relating to the shooting to come forward. More than 23,000 people have crossed the English Channel in small boats this year, more than double the number at the same time last year. GB News has learned another 500 migrants made the crossing today, with more boats coming in this afternoon. It follows a record day on Monday, which saw nearly 1,300 make the journey in 27 small boats. It's the highest daily total since current records began 4 years ago. TV, online and DAB Plus radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to Brazier.
Yes, welcome back. You are, of course, with me, Patrick Christie, sitting in for Colin Brazier on GB News, on your TV and on radio. Well, Boris Johnson has made a surprise visit to Kiev today to mark Ukraine's Independence Day and, of course, 6 months since the invasion from Russia. The Prime Minister said he believes Ukraine can and will win this war. So far, support for Ukraine from Western allies has remained steadfast. But as our security editor Mark White reports, some military experts predict that support could fracture as many countries simply struggle to cope with an energy shortage and a likely economic recession in the coming months.
6 months on from the Russian invasion, in the towns of eastern Ukraine, this has become a war of attrition. Here in Toretsk, Arkady Batchuk is back to sift through what remains of his apartment block after the latest Russian shelling, which killed 2 of his neighbours. To add to the misery here, the strikes have crippled the town's water supplies, but Arkady and many others here are determined to stay put.
We are not planning to leave. I was born here, even though my wife is from Lviv. We got married and are living here. We are not planning to run anywhere.
Since the first missiles rained down on Ukraine's towns and cities, the West has been united in both its condemnation of Moscow and its support for the Ukrainian people. In the early days of the war, the Russian tanks rolled quickly over many miles of Ukrainian soil, encircling key population centres, including Ukraine's second city, Kharkiv, which suffered weeks of bombardment. But a rush towards the capital was halted and then reversed, thanks to fierce Ukrainian resistance. And growing numbers of sophisticated Western weapons systems provided by key allies, including the US and the UK. That Western resolve is holding, but with a bleak winter ahead, with many countries feeling the effects of energy shortages and the likelihood of economic recession, maintaining that high level of support over the long run could be a tough ask.
I think we're going to see a reduction in unity as we get into the winter, particularly with the energy problems that countries like Germany will face, both domestically and in industrial terms. And that, I think, will lead to Germany and other Western countries, including NATO countries, reducing their support for Ukraine and probably pressuring Zelensky to come to terms with Russia.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
One of the first Western leaders to travel to the Ukrainian capital after the outbreak of the war, Boris Johnson has been at the forefront of support for President Zelensky's efforts to fight off Russian aggression. Publicly, at least, both candidates to take over from Boris Johnson say that support will continue.
What we've seen, in the past few months is the Russians have made some gains. They've taken some territory in the Donbas region, but they're very incremental. The Ukrainians are pushing back. We're back to it's World War I like trench warfare. It's a war of attrition, and so unless something dramatic happens to change this war can grind on for a long time.
In recent weeks, Ukrainian troops have begun a pushback in some key areas, including around the strategically important city of Kherson, currently under Russian control, but looking increasingly isolated. 6 months on, Ukraine's armed forces and its people are in this fight for the long haul. They desperately hope their Western allies are as committed in the months ahead. Mark White, GB News.
Yes, of course, that was Mark White who brought us that package. Indeed, he joins me right now in the studio. More on that news that the Prime Minister Boris Johnson, of course, has made a surprise visit to Ukraine today, and its time has come. It's time for our Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, great to see you. Thank you very much for bringing us that 6 months on, eh? I mean, in fact, I just feel like only yesterday you and I were on air the morning that Putin rolled the tanks in, 6 months ago.
You were just a boy then, it has to be said.
I was, mate, yeah.
You're barely older than that now, but good to see you again.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is the third visit by Boris Johnson to Kyiv since the outbreak of the war. He was one of the first Western leaders to get into Kyiv at a time when things were still pretty, I mean, they're pretty dangerous now. There's still the odd missile that comes over from the Russian side into Kiev on occasion. So, you know, he's taking a significant risk in going to what is still a war-torn country. But he wants to clearly show his support and his backing for the Ukrainian people, and to get that message out that despite the hardships that will face many Western economies in the months ahead as we go into winter with energy shortages, with rising food costs and rising costs of other commodities, partly because, of course, of the war in Ukraine, that Britain remains steadfast behind the Ukrainian people. We have been doing a lot, more than most countries, actually. The US today announced a further $3 billion in military spending. We've announced a further £54 million on top of the £2.3 billion that we've already pledged in the form of military and humanitarian assistance for Ukraine. That includes training up thousands of Ukrainian soldiers on Salisbury Plain. So Keir Starmer was there today, the Labour opposition leader, wanting to see for himself exactly what the British military is doing to help the Ukrainian forces train and be able to handle the sophisticated weapon systems that we and other countries are now supplying to them. This is what Sir Keir said after his visit.
Global reputation of British forces is of grit, of class, and of that sort of steely determination and courage on the battlefield. And I've had the opportunity to say thank you to them for providing that vital training. Some of these that they're training will be back on the front line in just a few days' time. So I've been able to say thank you for that training and for all the service they provide around the world. And my mission, my message to the Ukrainian people, to our troops, our NATO allies, is that on the issue of defending Ukraine against Russian aggression, we stand united. We will not be divided politically in the United Kingdom.
And some of those troops who've already been trained are back out in Ukraine now on the front line, taking the fight to the Russians. And the £54 million of additional military spending announced by the UK government today will be very important again for the Ukrainian military. They're going to be given 850 mini drones. They're about the size of mobile phones, but really incredibly useful kit when you're fighting in urban warfare in towns and villages around Ukraine. They can be used by the frontline troops to see where Russian forces are entrenched and then take the fight to them. So incredibly useful, just part of the missile systems and other very sophisticated Western weapon systems that are being sent to Ukraine to help them in this fight.
Talking of very sophisticated, Mark White, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very, very much. Great to have you on the show. Mark White there, of course, our Home and Security Editor. 6 months, ladies and gentlemen, since Putin rolled the tanks in. We're going to be returning to that story a bit later on. An angle on it that's a little bit closer to home, and it's the current state of people who've taken in Ukrainian refugees, the kind of where are they now type piece, really. A lot of people are saying, this cost of living crisis is really getting to me. I'm only getting about 350 quid a month to house these people. We can't afford it. We thought it was for 6 months. It looks like it might be forever. So we are actually going to be going to somebody who's housed not one, not two, but I think I'm right in saying about 8. Yes, that's right, massive house. 8 Ukrainian refugee families in his house. And surprise, surprise, he's now feeling the pinch a bit, but we'll be going to that very shortly. Coming up, though, yes, it's a new podcast by Meghan Markle, backed by unpopular demand. Is it just another excuse for her to talk about herself?
I don't ever remember personally feeling the negative connotation behind the word ambitious until I...
Oh, gosh, sorry. Yeah, Meghan Markle, goodness gracious me. I'll ask a psychotherapist whether or not Meghan Markle is a full-blown narcissist. It'll be a very short interview, I imagine. I'll be back in a moment. Stay tuned.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GBNews.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Meghan Markle is back by unpopular demand. She's released the first episode of what Spotify are calling her unfiltered and exclusive podcast, Archetypes, where she claimed to divulge previously unheard stories about her experience as a vital and intimate member of the royal family. So, literally trading off the family that she seems to despise. You stay classy, Meghan, that's right. Tennis great Serena Williams is the first guest to appear on this podcast, joining the Duchess of Sussex in a discussion about the double standards and the stigma attached to being an ambitious woman. Let's just take a little listen.
Ambition? Well, that was the whole point. So I don't ever remember personally feeling the negative connotation behind the word ambitious until I started dating my now husband. And apparently ambition is a terrible, terrible thing. For a woman, that is, according to some. So since I felt the negativity behind it, it's really hard to unfeel it. I can't unsee it either in the millions of girls and women who make themselves smaller, so much smaller on a regular basis.
Sorry, can you just wake me up when that's over? Oh, we're back on. Meghan's latest venture has already been criticised, with some listeners expressing disdain at the Duchess's tendency to relate everything back to herself. So, is her podcast just another me project? Well, broadcaster and psychotherapist Lucy Beresford joins me now. Lucy, thank you very much. Goodness gracious me, that was a hard watch, that Meghan Markle stuff, I must say. I sat through as much of it as I possibly could. It made me want to just walk into the sea and keep walking. But you psychoanalyse Meghan for me, please, really. Is this just a kind of narcissistic vanity project?
So would we say that you're not a fan, then, of the podcast?
No, I preferred her earlier work.
You listened to the first album. Well, the interesting thing about any of our interactions with people is that we bring a lot of our own biases, a lot of our own experiences to bear on our reaction. And quite a lot of this could be about a projection that if somebody wasn't a fan of Meghan Markle to begin with, they're probably not going to enjoy her podcast. But let's face it, anybody who sets themselves up to do a podcast, and I speak as someone who has, there is a tinge of self-promotion about it. There is a tinge of ambition. Maybe there is even a little bit of narcissism. But I would have to take issue with you with this big question of, is she a narcissist? Because it's a label that's banded around so often, particularly for people that somebody doesn't like.
Yes.
And the really classic hallmark of a narcissist is that they lack empathy. They may be very self-absorbed. They may really seek total adoration from other people. The key thing is that they lack empathy. And actually, from what I've seen of Meghan Markle, and I am not a personal friend and I've never met her, but she does seem to be able to relate to certain people, and she does have a lot of empathy for them.
Do you think, though, that there's a lot of fakery attached to it? I'm going to be doing a bit of a monologue on Meghan Markle later on. I was having a slightly deep dive, really, into some of their charitable things, right? And the Queen in this country is, OK, she's been around a long time, don't get me wrong, but she is our most charitable monarch, the most charitable monarch in history. The Charities Fund found that she's raised more than £1.5 billion over the course of her lifetime for a variety of different charities, whereas Meghan and Harry, the Archwell charity that they've got, spent more in legal fees than it raised in money. And I just can't... Do you think she's got a little lack of self-awareness with your psychotherapist hat on there? Do you think she really does feel as though she's some kind of charitable saviour? Does she buy into that?
I think this is someone who recognised that she had this incredible platform and she really wanted to be able to massage that, to be able to make it work. Maybe not just for other people, maybe for her as well. But we here in the UK, we are so used to the monarchy being run in a very particular way. As you said, the Queen has been around, it seems like forever. And that is the model that we're all used to. We're not used to royal members of the family being arguably a bit more media savvy than the media people in general, or to be actually, as Meghan herself said, to be ambitious. We're just not used to that. So I think there was always going to be a bit of a clash of cultures there. And arguably, if you're a fan, you're going to stay a fan, you're going to listen. I listened to the podcast. I wanted to hear what Serena had to say, not just what Meghan has to say.
Nice.
It is interesting to hear someone else's perspective. But at the same time, do I think their charity has really worked? At the moment, I almost feel like it's only been got off the ground in the last couple of years. Surely we ought to give them a bit of a chance.
Give them a bit of a chance. That's the view of Lucy Beresford. Thank you very much, Lucy. Hey, great to have you on the show. Thank you for your expert input there. Broadcaster and psychotherapist Lucy Beresford, who really accurately described a narcissist. Unrelated, Kelvin McKenzie is here now. Kelvin, thank you very much for joining us.
Right.
I'm only joking.
Look here, if we're going to have a competition about narcissism,
yeah, fair.
I think, honestly, you win by a country mile.
That's a fair point. I'll let you have that one. But I don't suppose, did you happen to watch any of this Meghan Markle?
No, but what is interesting, and what gets lost in all this, by the way, this is about money.
Yeah.
Right, Spotify, unbelievably, have paid $18 million for this, what we think is nonsense. Now, if, however, the publicity is enormously helpful, as it will be, to Spotify, they may think that's a good investment. Now, over here in the UK, me, you, and most ordinary people look upon her as some kind of traitor who has taken away this great prize, Harry, who's turned out, by the way, to be absolutely hopeless, and transported him to a world we don't know. Where, isn't it interesting? The house they live in on the West Coast has 14 bathrooms, whereas the one over here that William and Kate are going to go into has 2. Right?
Yeah. Well, Harry's got slightly more hair products.
That is true. Well, I could do with some of it myself. It hasn't worked for me, but it's obviously not doing a lot for Harry, actually. But so this is a world we don't know. We don't. We kind of knew the Harry world, you know, service, opening things, trying to be brave and everything over there. And so the longer that she talks Californian waffle. And by the way, he'll adopt it as well.
Oh, he has.
So the old waffleometer will be going like that, right? And the Californian waffleometer would be incredible, right? It won't do us any good. It will confirm our views. But the question is, Spotify is a global product. They might say to themselves, $18 million, actually not a bad investment.
No, fair enough. We are going to be returning to this because I'm going to do a bit of a monologue to get my, if people couldn't tell, you know, my real true feelings about Meghan Markle and Prince Harry out there.
I think they do know. I think they do know the way you feel.
Well, hopefully, anyway. And then I'll be returning to you on that as well, Kelvin. So there's so much we can get stuck into with... I'm just going to call them the Markles, really, because that's he's just an extension of her now, isn't he? But there we go. Lots of you have been getting in touch. I wanted to squeeze these views in before we actually headed over to a break. Thank you very much for getting in touch. Most of you talking about the migrants crossing the channel and basically how many of them there are. I think that we should get out of the EHCR, which will remove the woke lawyers which stop us taking control of the situation. I couldn't see the name on that one, but to whoever you were, thank you very much. Bill says, every immigrant that arrives will require somewhere to live. Good point. We simply can't build 1,300 extra homes a day to what we already need. Absolutely, spot on. Of course, that means more migrant hotels. Those migrants are then leaving those hotels, taking up the Home Office is bidding for private rental stock. So even normal people who are here, been living here for years on a council waiting list, the social housing will go to these people. And then if you're just looking to get your first flat, maybe, I don't know, maybe you want to pay 400 quid a month, something like that, which, to be fair, down south will get you absolutely naff all, but maybe you might get something up north for a one-bed flat for 400 quid a month or something like that. Well, good luck, because the Home Office is going to be bidding for it as well with you. Susan's been up. Susan, once again, you are spot on, I like you, Susan, about these illegal migrants, Patrick. The EU should be sending these people back before they get anywhere near France. If this carries on, the National Front will have a resurgence. It's a genuine concern. It's a genuine concern, Susan. And of course, I don't want to see, and never would ever, I'm sure none of us do, want to see anything like that whatsoever. But at the same time, it becomes very, very tricky, doesn't it, to see how these people don't become more emboldened. When you are presented with a radical situation, people often, all too often, come up with radical solutions. And I can't help but feel we're sleepwalking towards something like that. But it's coming up to 5 o'clock. Goodness me, where's that first hour gone? Hey, you're watching and listening to me, Patrick Christie's, back here on GB News. I had about a month and a bit off. It's a pleasure to be back. Lots still to come. I'll be back in a moment. Kelvin McKenzie joins me throughout. Don't you dare move.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Yes, hello, that's right, it's me, Patrick Christie's here, and we are live at 5. I'm covering for Brazier, and I've got a chock-a-block hour heading your way, so let's get cracking, shall we? 23,000 and counting. That's the number of migrants who've crossed the English Channel this year alone, already, in fact, with another 500 reaching the UK on small boats today. I, for one, am sick and tired of seeing this number rising. I'm sick and tired of being told that it's racist to want tougher border controls. We need to clamp down and not be afraid of calling it what it is. In many cases, it's simply mass, illegal, economic immigration. But now, the French, they've piped up, claiming that we owe them 8 million big ones for their attempts to patrol beaches. Not doing a very good job of it, are they? Stop the migrants coming over. Surely they're having a laugh. I'm assuming that in true French style, their Coast Guard have gone on strike for the last year because they've been about as much use as a chocolate teapot or indeed the Maginot Line when it comes to stopping people getting through. An unfiltered version of Meghan Markle is what Spotify is promising from her new podcast. Absolutely, we look forward to it, don't we? No, thank you. Just this clip alone. I mean, it just makes me want to bang my head against this desk repeatedly until I render myself unconscious. Have a listen.
I don't ever remember personally feeling the negative connotation behind the word ambitious until I started dating my now husband.
I wish you'd be ambitious somewhere else, Randy, but there we go. I'm going to be making my views on the demanding Duchess very shortly in my monologue, and I'll also be speaking to royal biographer Angela Levin about Markle's long-awaited exclusive Archetypes podcast series, which is on Spotify. And the manhunt is on for the depraved gun-toting killer who shot a child to death in Liverpool. Police, the media, and indeed the nation are begging those who know the shooter to turn this vile thug in. What on earth is happening as law and disorder reigns in broken Britain? The Police and Crime Commissioner for Hampshire will have her say. We're going to be talking about all of that and much, much more. I want to go to your views as well. GBviews at gbnews.uk. But with me throughout this hour now, former editor of The Sun, it's the man himself. It's Kelvin McKenzie. But before we let him off the leash, that's right, it's time for your headlines with the wonderful Tatiana Sanchez.
Thank you, Patrick. Good afternoon. It is 3 minutes past 5. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. Boris Johnson has made a surprise visit to Ukraine's capital to mark the country's Independence Day. Speaking with his Ukrainian counterpart, Volodymyr Zelensky, in Kyiv, the Prime Minister said he believes Ukraine can and will win this war. Mr. Johnson's visit to the war-torn country comes as it also marks 6 months since the Russian invasion began. On his last visit to the war-torn country before leaving office, Mr. Johnson set out a further £54 million package of military aid and vowed the UK will continue to stand with Ukraine.
And I see the Ukrainian flag flying here. You will see it also in the streets of London, in villages, in towns across the whole of the UK. And my essential message for you today is that support for your struggle to keep your independence is indivisible and will remain whatever happens in UK politics.
Meanwhile, the United States has announced an aid package to Ukraine worth more than £2.5 billion. President Joe Biden says the funding will allow Ukraine to acquire weapons, air defence systems and radars to defend itself for years to come. The Chancellor says freezing the energy price cap isn't off the table. Speaking at a wind farm in West Lothian, Nadeem Zahawi says he wants to focus on helping the poorest families. He also says the Russian president has been using energy as a tool against the British people.
We need targeted help to the families that need it the most. Why do I say that? Because wealthier households who will then become the beneficiaries of a price cap freeze will not necessarily need the help as much as, of course, those families that are really stretched. I need to make sure that every pound is targeted and is stretched as far as we can make it, whilst we continue to support Ukraine in their battle against Putin. So targeting is important, and of course delivering the 37 billion. We're midway through that now.
The 35-year-old man suspected of being the target of a shooting in Liverpool, which killed a 9-year-old girl, has been named by newspapers as convicted burglar Joseph Nee. Merseyside police earlier confirmed he'll be questioned in connection with the murder of Olivia Pratt-Corbell. His arrest is for breaching the terms of his release from prison. Officers are urging anyone with information relating to the shooting to come forward. Auxiliary Bishop of Liverpool, Thomas Williams, explains the impact it's had on the community.
This would galvanise, I think, people, to get them. I think that we are totally united in this, in every single way, by the horror of it. The biggest problem, I think, is fear. Fear, and that's what people are highlighting now. If people are afraid, what they're afraid of. And the problem is we're very often afraid of the unknown. When things like this happen, it's too real.
Meanwhile, in London, police investigating the shooting of an 18-year-old man have offered a £20,000 reward for information about his murder. Newly released CCTV footage shows a car involved in the shooting of Alex Ayanaku, who died nearly a year ago. A new appeal for information comes amid a wave of violent crimes in the capital. More than 23,000 people have crossed the English Channel in small boats this year, more than double the number at the same time last year. GBNews has learned another 500 migrants made the crossing today, with more boats coming in this afternoon. It follows a record day on Monday, which saw nearly 1,300 make the journey in 27 small boats. It's the highest daily total since current records began 4 years ago. Ofgem has been challenged by Scotland's Children's Commissioner over the decision to raise the energy price cap. Bruce Adamson's written to the industry regulator about the potential impact of a cap increase. He's warning more families will be pushed into poverty this winter. Ofgem will make its latest announcement on Friday, with experts forecasting average annual bills will increase to more than £3,500. Bin strikes in Edinburgh in recent days are expected to grow as refuse collectors at 13 Scottish local authorities plan to walk out. Bin workers from cities including Glasgow, Dundee and Aberdeen will join their colleagues in Edinburgh in taking industrial action. Trade unions were offered a 5% pay rise, but a deal wasn't reached. Rubbish has been piling up in the Scottish capital since the strike started last Thursday, and they aren't expected to end for another week. Princess Diana's much-loved Ford Escort is due to be auctioned this weekend at Silverstone. The car, driven by Princess Diana in the late 1980s, is thought to be one of a kind, the only RS Turbo Series 1 in black. It's expected to fetch more than £100,000. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Brazier.
Meghan Markle can join Tony Blair on the list of people I like to call the unflushables. The Z-list actress who married up is back at it with the long-awaited launch of her multi-million-pound podcast, Archetypes. In the first episode, she explains how ambition can be seen as a bad thing for a woman. She was joined by her really close friend, Serena Williams. So, the podcast was a discussion between a woman who has worked incredibly hard for what she's got, obtained fame and fortune on merit and merit alone, has real things of value to say about women striving for success, and indeed the obstacles they face. And, well, then there's Meghan Markle. Meghan, of course, took the opportunity to have another subtle dig at our royal family, saying that she didn't realise ambition for women was a bad thing until she married Harry. This implies that it's hard to be a woman in the royal family, which I imagine came as a huge shock to our longest ever reigning monarch, Queen Elizabeth II, who is, of course, a woman. Meghan appears to have a mistaken understanding of what the word ambition really means, especially when it comes to the royal family. The ambition is not to launch clothing brands, to engage in brash publicity stunts or be filmed by Netflix. No, the ambition is about dedicated national service. The Queen has done more for charity than any monarch in history. The Charities Aid Foundation revealed that she's raised more than £1.4 billion for worthy causes. Meanwhile, there are reports that Meghan and Harry's Archewell charity spent more money on legal fees in its first year than it raised for good causes. I think Meghan's probably right to an extent, though, isn't she? Ambition for women can be a bad thing, especially if that ambition happens to be shamelessly using a royal brand to achieve fame and fortune and wanting to be seen as a force for good in the world without actually putting in much of the work needed to be a force for good in the world. For somebody who appears to have despised the royal institution so much, it does seem slightly odd to me that Meghan is so keen to hang on to a Duchess of Sussex title. In fact, I'm surprised that Meghan actually has any fingernails left, because in my view, she's been desperately clinging on to relevance by using that royal title ever since she found freedom by crying into Oprah's bosom. But I suspect what will hurt the royal family more than any of Meghan's barbed comments is what she's done to Prince Harry. I can't help but feel like she uses Harry as some kind of pathetic trophy to beat the royals with. Look what I've done to your prince. I've turned him against his family, made him move continents, and I've lobotomised him with wokedom. It really is toe curling to see what's happened to Harry. Once this lovable rogue who served this country, now just a simpering, cringeworthy husk of a man, wheeled in like an obedient, slightly slow on the uptake dog to add clout to Meghan's brand. It's clear for all to see. Meghan needed Harry to propel herself to fame and fortune. She used to hide behind him, didn't he? Use her as her rock. But he served his purpose now, hasn't he? He's served his purpose, and now she only wants him to make cameo appearances during interviews and sit there like a good little boy. It's tragic. I sat through a fair bit of Meghan's inane virtue-signalling nonsense, but personally, I'd rather strap weights to my ankles and jump into a vat of acid than subject myself to any more of it. Let's get your views coming in thick and fast on this, people. GB Views at gbnews.uk. Loads on the Channel Migrant issue. We'll be returning to that. I expect loads on these as well. You've not been shy so far today, so don't let it stop now. But the former editor of The Sun, Kelvin McKenzie, joins me. He's with me for the next hour. Kelvin, Meghan Markle, Prince Harry, we've spoken a little bit about this. Do you feel almost sorry for Prince Harry?
No, I don't. Not at all. Not at all. I mean, he was a guy 30 plus. He had a decision to make. And when offered the choice between a life of service or giving his rather half-witted thoughts to the west coast of America, he chose that. It's an easier life for him. And he was never going to be the top dog. He was never going to be king. And as far as he said, right, I'm off ski then. And now I rather liked your rant there because actually he's sitting there. Yeah. Meghan's giving her views. Why her views matter, by the way. So she was all right, she was an actress. She didn't have a big role in that soap. No. That ended. By the way, when the soap ended, that was the end of the career. It was. I mean, it's not as though somebody was on the phone saying, I'd like you to appear in Coronation Street, or, by the way, do you fancy a bit of Top Gun at all? Nobody was interested in her. So she had a choice. I need to marry somebody on the up. Yeah. So she marries him on the up, and immediately he's on the down.
Can I just politely suggest that Meghan and Harry are not the most intelligent of people in the world that the world has ever seen? Meghan potentially more so than Prince Harry. That's not too hard.
Certainly cunning.
Cunning, right. Cunning. Now, what really cracks me up about this is that, especially Meghan does this, where she thinks she's kind of pouring out some great enlightened truth to people, which is something just really basic, you know what I mean? It's like, you know, and they think that they've almost cracked life. Prince Harry sitting there at a kind of barefoot yoga retreat that he's had to fly into, and he thinks he's cracked life, you know? And
well, he has cracked life, hasn't he? He's got a private jet. Yeah. As far as I can see, he's got no career. He doesn't seem to have a talent. There isn't some kind of magic. He's not kind of Mozart.
I seem to remember him being pretty good at billiards in Vegas.
He was. And I tell you what, I was thinking, if anybody has still got those photos or those videos of the old kit all coming off and the ladies and all the rest of it, it'd be worth more than the 18 million which they got for Spotify. Isn't it? I mean, in my old, and by the way, I refer to it as a career, right?
Yes.
Right, my old career as the editor of The Sun. How much is that video worth?
Unbelievable. Unbelievable, yeah. But do you think Meghan actually really believes this hype? Do you think that she does see herself as some kind of modern-day saviour?
She's handing out her thoughts from the top.
From the gods?
Yeah. There we are.
I've got a direct line to God.
Imagine old Harry's having to sit there and soak this up. At the beginning, there's plenty of that going on. Now that there's been a number of years gone by, there's probably very little. And all that's left is this woman giving her views on Spotify.
I keep waiting for him to, like, look straight down the barrel of the camera and just blink in Morse code, like, just blink SOS, and it never comes. Every time she moves, part of me thinks he's just going to, you know, like, just kind of, oh, sorry, Meghan, you know. But there we go. Of course, if you want to listen to that podcast, go and listen to it on Spotify. Alternatively, you can buy a tin of paint and watch it dry. Kelvin will be returning to you later on in the show. Now, lots of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts on Meghan Markle's new podcast. Hey, that was quick. There you go. I only asked for these a few minutes ago. Oh, it's kicked off. Richard says, she is so narcissistic. Ambitious is the wrong way to describe her. It is the self-promotion at the expense of all others that I hate. Strong stuff, Richard. Thank you for your views. Barbara's been on. Hello, Barbara. Princess Anne has been the hardest working royal with absolute respect for the monarchy. So has the Queen. Exactly what are Meghan's ambitions? Fantastic point, Barbara. She's got a different ambition, right, to the royal family. The idea that the royal family stifles women's ambition, I think, is pretty shocking stuff, really, when you consider that we've had our longest-serving monarch is a woman, Princess Anne, as you've rightly said there, a notoriously hard-working royal, of course, on top of that. But their ambition appears to be more to do service behind the scenes, dare I say it, with a little bit more British subtlety than what you might get in California these days. Michael says, without being contrary, I rather like Meghan Markle. Hey, here we go, some balance. Fantastic. Balance from Michael. I think she is a delightful person and a very good actress. Good stuff, Michael. I'll tell you what, I don't know what someone put in your coffee, but I'll have 2 of them, please, mate. Thank you for that. Great stuff. Right, OK, well, we're moving on from that now. The number of migrants who have crossed the English Channel to make it to the UK has surpassed now 23,000 for the year. Your ears are not deceiving you, 23,000 for the year. And with 500 people reaching our shores today alone as well. But as the country seemingly continues to fail to deal with the huge numbers of, in my view, many, many, many economic migrants coming to our country, in fact, not just my view, in fact, the view of a chap who worked Albanian immigration, who's basically revealed what a lot of Albanian men are doing. But we're now actually being called out by the French. They've accused the UK of failing to pay £8 million to fund beach patrols there. What beach patrols? It's record upon record. Anyway, in my view, the local authority that covers Calais hasn't really provided much of a service worth £8 million, having only intercepted 390 crossings, accounting for less than a quarter of Monday's total to reach the UK. Joining me now is senior GB News contributor, it's Tim Montgomery. Tim, great to have you on the show. Thank you very much for joining me. It's tough to know where to start with this. Let's start with the overarching figures to begin with. And I'm sick and tired now of the lack of will of people to call out the economic elements of this migration, this kind of EU flag-waving brigade of people who say that, you know, everyone's a refugee. Yeah. I find that hard to swallow at the minute.
Well, where do you begin, Patrick? There's so many aspects of this that are hard to swallow. But maybe one area where you and I slightly disagree, we're about to find out, although I certainly agree with what you've just been saying about Meghan Markle, is the German army couldn't stop the Allied forces invading Normandy in the Second World War. The idea that a small battalion of French police officers can stop migrants crossing the Channel, I think is for the birds, to be honest. We could pay them not £8 million more, 80 million, 800 million more, and probably they'd still get over. This people smuggling business is incredibly organised. You know, they have spotters out looking for French police, and when they see French police approaching, they change where they launch the crossings. The only way we'll really turn the tide on this exodus of migrants from France to Britain is if we start sending them back in large numbers. OK. And until we do that, you know, I don't think we'll see a change.
Now, this is a really interesting point, and I think a lot of people have shied away from getting stuck into the towing the boats issue back. A lot of people are very nervous about this, and I can understand why. If towing the boats back means a clogging up of boats in the Channel, which at this rate it would.
Yeah.
And that means that, unfortunately, a couple of them sink and let's just say, 50-odd people die, say. Yeah. Are you able to tolerate that for the bigger picture of stopping migration? Because that, I think, is what our politicians are afraid of.
And I'm afraid of that too, to be honest. I think even if one person died because the Royal Navy had pushed a boat back and it capsized or something, I think the average, moderate, middle ground voter would hate that.
Yes.
Where I think the absolute strong position we need to take is we take them here, and there'll be a cost to this, immediate financial cost, but they are immediately deported. We have been through the UK court system now. The UK courts have said the policy of deporting people to Rwanda is legal. The problem is the European Court of Human Rights. If the first thing, after tax cuts, whatever Liz Truss is promising to do, is to take us out of the ECHR as soon as we possibly can, I think there would be widespread support for that. Because, these migrant crossings, not only do they undermine everybody's confidence in the British border, of course, they're also putting people at risk. And if we're really worried about deaths in the Channel, it's the continuation of this process, not turning them back, that's the real evil.
Yeah, absolutely. And someone raised it earlier on. I am concerned, just playing the tape forward a bit on this, I'm concerned about the potential to sleepwalk into a situation where we get really, really extreme far-right stuff going on.
Absolutely.
Right? Now, look, it's pretty obvious where I stand on the Channel issue. I want us to clamp down massively hard on this, so no one can accuse me of being some kind of bleeding heart liberal.
I don't think that is likely to ever happen.
No,
Patrick, but
it's not. But at the same time, I would absolutely detest to live in a country with a rampant extreme far-right force. Okay. But I wonder whether or not we're heading there, because these numbers of people coming over, we've got a housing crisis, people are skint, cost of living crisis going through the roof, and we end up with these migrant hotels. They're then going into the local system. They're then going to the lower end of the private rental stock, public services, schools, NHS, you know the drill. Well, I'm sorry, but just for that practical element of it alone, we've got it, and increasing the black market as well, increasing crime and drug dealing, etc. We are sleepwalking towards disaster if we don't sort this out, aren't we?
Well, Margaret Thatcher, in the end of the 1970s, she took a hard line on immigration, and lots of lefties hated it. But what she did then was she stopped dead the advance of what was then the National Front, a racist, BNP-style organisation. And she took what, for some left-wing people, was intolerable, but actually it was a position tolerated, supported by the vast majority of the British people. And it's only actually when conservative, centre-right parties take a mainstream position on immigration do you actually stop the far-right growing. So you're completely right on this one. This is where we do agree.
We're back in the
consensus at the end of our conversation. It's when the mainstream right fails to deal with immigration properly, that's when you get extremism.
Very quickly, if there was a referendum tomorrow that surveyed the entire nation and asked whether or not people thought that something drastic needs to happen in the Channel, whether or not we needed tighter border controls in the Channel, more deportations, what do you think the result of that referendum would be, percentage-wise, in terms of people in favour of tighter control, sending more people back?
I think it would be overwhelmingly to bring control and order and potentially deportations, etc. Because the first duty of the government, of any government, is to defend the country from external threats. If people think anyone could come into our country at their time of choosing, not ours, we're vulnerable.
I absolutely couldn't agree with you more, and we're seeing more and more people moving away now from inner city areas, taking themselves off to leafy suburbs because actually they don't want to live in the type of situation that they seem to be calling for. But Tim, thank you very, very much. Great to have you on the show, my good man. There we are, of course, Tim Montgomery there, who is senior GB News contributor. Lots of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts on exactly what we were just talking about there, the migrants crossing the Channel. Paul's been on. Thank you, Paul. How can any migrant say they are coming here for a better life with their family? They're mostly men coming alone. Where is their family? Interesting point there, Paul, because I referred to this earlier on, actually, which was about the fact that the Home Office revealed that last year, 90%, it's according to the Home Office, of arrivals were men on their own, OK? So it is interesting where the family is. Contrast that to a lot of what appears to be happening in Ukraine. Very much a genuine conflict taking place in Ukraine. As we've seen, women and children fleeing in their droves, rightly so. many men staying. You don't see the same kind of numbers, the same kind of demographic, shall I say, when it comes to a Ukrainian immigration system, does it? Marianne's been on. I cannot understand why our politicians are just sitting on their hands while all these illegal people enter our shores. We're in a cost of living crisis, and yet we are paying so much money to feed and look after these people in hotels. Why don't they come through legal routes? Marianne, I was just touching on this earlier on, actually, wasn't I? It's not just the hotels, OK, which there's increasing numbers of. Those hotels are being rendered full, and then local councils are being told that as and when those claims are processed, how long that is anyone's guess, then they themselves are going to have to find local housing stock, which means a young single mum, or potentially, dare I say it, the woman who's had to flee a violent husband, for example, someone like that, who's been waiting on a housing waiting list, a military veteran, right, is sitting there waiting, bump down a list. So then you save up enough money, you try to get yourself into the lower end of the private rental sector. Let's say you've got a few £100 a month that you can spend on that, something. Well, you've just been gazumped by the Home Office, I'm afraid, because they're doing that now. You hit a very good point there, Marianne. How long can the generosity of the British public survive with all of this going on, especially with the cost of living crisis? People selling their pets or getting rid of their pets because they can't heat their homes. 70% of pubs closing, for goodness sake. Those bills piling up at the door. Well, we've got the money for something, haven't we? Anyway, there we go. In the previous hour, we did speak about, very tragically, OK, we're moving on from this now, we spoke about the death of 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell, who was shot, terrible stuff this, who was shot as her mother struggled with two men, one armed with a gun, at the door of her Liverpool home on Monday night. The latest in a long line, frankly, of very recent shocking crimes to hit this country. This morning, police arrested the man who was targeted by the gunman in the shooting, so not the gunman himself. He's been named as 35-year-old Joseph Nee. A manhunt is now underway for the gunman, with some calling Britain's streets lawless, something that's been compounded by a recent scene of chaos, a mass raid of a McDonald's in Nottingham, items being stolen from shops on Oxford Street in London. That's unfortunately very, very old gentleman stabbed to death for what we believe was a charity box, you know, for raise money for people in Ukraine. Bloodbath, bloodbath, bloodbath. Tyson Fury's cousin stabbed in the neck outside a pub in Altrincham. It's never ending. Joining me now to discuss how bad this situation is the Conservative Police and Crime Commissioner for Hampshire, Donna Jones. Donna, thank you very much for joining us. Really great to have you on the show. Thank you for coming into the studio. When people call Britain lawless, is that an exaggeration?
Well, I can understand why people feel that way. I mean, it feels to me, as a citizen of this country, as someone who's lived here my whole life, that there has been a significant change in the volume and seriousness of crime in this country over the last 5 years. What's happened over the last week with the 87-year-old man, completely unprovoked, being killed, a young girl being murdered in her home, by an armed gunman on the streets of Britain. This is really, really worrying. And as a police and crime commissioner and as a parent myself, I'm really worried too.
Yeah, absolutely. Earlier on in the show, we kind of did one angle on it, which was potentially the role of broken homes, you could call it, specifically fatherless homes, when it comes to the impact or the correlation potentially between things like gang crime, knife crime, all of that stuff. I'd like to focus with you more on the police side of things. It would make sense, of course, police and crime commissioner. Another big concern from the public is that there isn't enough of a deterrence. Police, as I understand it anyway, have not made any arrests from that looting in Nottingham's McDonald's. You can see people on camera. Do you worry that people have a lack of faith in the police to actually bring some of these criminals to book?
In terms of serious and organised crime, yes, I think that there is a lot more that needs to be done. People can report anonymously through Crime Stoppers. Of course, that's exactly the angle that quite rightly Merseyside police have taken in that campaign to find the killer of that poor little girl, of Olivia. They are saying if you know something, if you're a member of an organised crime gang, if you're the parent, if you're the brother, sister of a gang member, please come forward, because it's going to make the streets of Liverpool safer. That is absolutely key. I've just come from a meeting at the Home Office. I was there for the hour immediately before here, talking about serious and organised crime. I'm the national spokesman for police commissioners in that area. There is a lot that needs to be done. Now, for me, as a police commissioner, prevention is better than cure. What do we have to do as a country? What does policing have to do? Importantly, what does the government need to do to prevent kids from getting killed in their own homes, from elderly people in mobility scooters, affecting nobody from being stabbed? For me, this is about recognising that there is a problem, that why is it that, 15, 16, 17-year-old 14-year-old boys born and brought up in this country are now carrying knives. They weren't doing that so much 10, and they definitely weren't doing it 20 years ago. So what's happened in Britain in 2022 to make them feel that they need a knife to keep themselves safe and protect themselves? That's the question that needs answering.
Can I ask you a difficult question? Potentially difficult, bit of a minefield, this one, but I don't shy away from that kind of stuff. Are there any elements to this when it comes to things like the readiness to use a knife, the readiness to murder? Maybe I could argue how cheap life is, for example, that in elements of it could be considered a slightly cultural thing. If people have come here from places where potentially, maybe they're fleeing a civil war, for example, and they've seen a lot of things there. Are you seeing any evidence of that being involved when it comes to things like spiralling knife crime? Or is it, really a domestic issue here as well? Both, maybe?
Right, I think it's a domestic issue that's caused by some immigration, and I think you're asking the absolute right question. We need to look at whereabouts in the country those young, they are often single men coming on these migrant boats into Britain. Where are they coming from? They're coming from Albania, they're coming from Eritrea, they're coming from Sudan. These are all countries where people carry knives, they carry them for farming, for hunting, for keeping themselves safe in their villages. That to them is commonplace in their country, in their culture. They arrive here in Britain, it's not commonplace. Absolutely. Their approach towards women is often incredibly different when it comes to rapes and serious sexual assaults. And I think for anyone who is in civic life, who is in working in the government, to not recognise that there is a link up between particularly these young teenage men who are coming here often as economic migrants, let's call it what it is, there is a connection to the way that they are behaving and then the effect it's having, coming back to your domestic part, of our teenage boy population in this country that then feel that they need to carry the knife to keep themselves safe, which leads on from the previous point that I made.
Exactly. Look, you're going to have to come back on, OK, because I could talk to you about this stuff all day, and I've really, really enjoyed that, and I'm absolutely sure our viewers and listeners will have done as well. Thank you so much for making the time to come into the studio here. Of course, Donna Jones there, Hampshire Police and Crime Commissioner, talking a lot of sense, I think we can all agree. You are with me, Patrick Christys, right here on GB News, on your TV, online and on your digital radio. Here's what's coming up, you lucky people, OK? The Prime Minister Boris Johnson has made a surprise visit to Ukraine today, although he's there so often that it's hardly a surprise anymore. Ukraine, of course, marks 6 months since the start of the Russian invasion of the country. Thousands of refugees fled their homes and have settled right here in the UK, with a lot of families committing to keep them here. But actually, have they bitten off more than they can chew? We'll speak to someone who's been offering his home up to no less than 8 Ukrainians. I'll be back in a tick. See you soon.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good afternoon. It's 5:35. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. Boris Johnson has made a surprise visit to Ukraine's capital to mark the country's Independence Day. Speaking with his Ukrainian counterpart, Volodymyr Zelensky, in Kyiv, the Prime Minister said he believes Ukraine can and will win this war. On his last visit to the war-torn country before leaving office, Mr Johnson set out a further £54 million package of military aid and vowed the UK will continue to stand with Ukraine.
And I see the Ukrainian flag flying here. You will see it also in the streets of London, in villages, in towns across the whole of the UK. And my essential message for you today is that support for your struggle to keep your independence is indivisible and will remain whatever happens in UK politics.
The man suspected of being the target of a shooting in Liverpool which killed a 9-year-old girl has been named by newspapers as convicted burglar Joseph Nee. Merseyside police earlier confirmed the 35-year-old will be questioned in connection with the murder of Olivia Pratt-Corbell. His arrest is for breaching the terms of his release from prison. Officers are urging anyone with information relating to the shooting to come forward. More than 23,000 people have crossed the English Channel in small boats this year, more than double the number at the same time last year. GBNews has learned another 500 migrants made the crossing today, with more boats coming in this afternoon. It follows a record day on Monday, which saw nearly 1,300 make the journey in 27 small boats. It's the highest daily total since current records began 4 years ago. TV online and DAB Plus radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to Brazier.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.180 and €1.183, and the price of gold currently stands at £1,484.76 per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
Anyway, yes, OK. Hello, everybody. We are indeed back. Kelvin McKenzie and I enjoying ourselves a little bit too much during the break there. You're, of course, with me, Patrick Christie's, sitting in for Colin Brazier right here on GB News, on TV and on radio. Today marks 6 months since the start of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, with the Prime Minister Boris Johnson making a surprise visit to Kiev today. But back here in the UK, more than 100,000 Ukrainian refugees have arrived in the country over the last 6 months. And those who've hosted them have received £350 per month from the government under the Homes for Ukraine scheme. Well, now joining me is Martin Holton, who is the host of no less than 8 Ukrainian refugees. Thank you very, very much. OK, all right, so just talk me through this now, because a lot of people, I mean, you have kind of gone to the extreme, really, with 8, but a lot of people now who maybe just had one or a couple or a woman and a child are saying that it's too much for them now. They thought it'd be just 6 months. It's just gone 6 months, potentially. They thought that, you know, they were going to end up maybe with a bit more money. I don't know. But they're struggling amidst this cost of living crisis. How are you doing with it?
We're doing fine. We're doing very well. They're very happy in my house. They're no trouble to me. The 3 mothers who are there looking after the children have all got jobs, so they work. It is harder with the cost of the electric and everything else, but it's something I wanted to do, and I'll continue to do it for as long as they need to be there.
No, absolutely. And, I mean, you would appear in quite a fortunate situation there, potentially in terms of the size of your property, potentially in the fact that you appeared to be able to fund that kind of thing. But when you decided to take on no less than 8 Ukrainian refugees, were you of the mindset that you might be getting a bit of money for each of them? What is the financial situation in terms of the government giving you a helping hand?
They give you £350 per household. It's not per person, so whether you've got 1 or 20 or 30, it's only £350. That's all you get. But that's not the point, really. I am in a fortunate enough position that it doesn't really affect me that much. And I'm quite happy to do it, to continue to do it.
No, that's great. I mean, look, you are doing wonderful stuff, obviously, and as you've rightly said, you say, yeah, fair enough, you're in a fortunate position. I'm sure you've worked very hard to be in that position, and, you're doing a good thing with the use of your position. So it's a fantastic thing. My concern is potentially more for people, shall we say, slightly at another end of the economic spectrum, shall we say, who took people in, out of the goodness of their heart, who now might feel a little bit stranded by government or, frankly, just can't afford to keep these people in their homes. And my concern now is, where do those people go and live? Because we're going to have to find something along the lines of about 80,000 homes for these people, on top of what's going on in the Channel, on top of the fact that we already had a housing crisis.
Yeah, no, and there is a lot of that happening in Warwickshire. People that are looking for schools, they need to be close to the schools. One of the problems that my guests have is that I'm a little bit out in the sticks, so it's hard for them to get into the town. So when the children start school September time, it's going to be a bit of a battle getting 5 of them to three different schools while the school terms are on. But we can cope with it. They've got a vehicle off me, but it's a lot of shunting backwards and forwards to get them to and from school.
Yeah,
there's a lot of people locally that are not doing so well with their guests, whether it be through cost, whether it be through getting on. The guests want to move on.
Are you hearing some horror stories just quickly of people not getting on with their Ukrainian refugee?
Yes, but both sides. The Ukrainians not getting on with the hosts and vice versa. There's a hell of a lot of it.
What are some of the main issues that you're coming across there when you're hearing these things?
One of them is cost. That they've obviously done it for 6 months thinking that it might be over. I was a bit more open-minded and realised that wouldn't happen. Yeah. The others are clashes of maybe the daughter and the other children not getting on, and schooling. And obviously, if you're in a 3-bedroomed house and you've got to share that with strangers, I suppose, to start with, it can be a bit much.
Yeah, I can agree with you, and I do think, and I don't want to criticise anyone here who's taken in a Ukrainian refugee and is now struggling, because I can fully understand how they were all swept up with the emotion of it to begin with, and indeed their heart was in the right place. But I'm not sure everyone thought it through. Martin, I'm sure you did think it through. You're doing rather well. But Martin Holton there, thank you very, very much. Of course, been offering his home to no less than 8 Ukrainian refugees. Kelvin McKenzie is back with me now. Kelvin, former editor of The Sun. What do you make of this? There have been a few issues, haven't there, with regards to people maybe taking in Ukrainian refugees and realising they've bitten off a bit more than they can chew, or it wasn't all rosy in the garden, for example?
Well, first of all, I admire fantastically people who have done this, right? My ex-wife actually had a Ukrainian refugee and she's staying there right now. So that's fantastic. And the daughter, right? So that's... Don't start smiling.
I'm not smiling.
Right. So there's that, right? However, you're not necessarily going to like everybody that comes your way, are you? The churches have been very big in getting the Ukrainians to come in. And I think we should be very, very grateful for almost everybody. Even if something doesn't work out, it's better that they're here on an island nation, 1,500 miles away, than facing missiles from that thug Putin. And the fact is, we are defeating Putin. It's quite clear today from the Defence Secretary that actually they're going nowhere, and the Russians now are sitting on a very large potty as they're expecting the Ukrainians to start attacking them. So I celebrate even the difficulties that we face in our country right now.
Absolutely. Well done, Kelvin. Right, Kelvin will be back with me very, very shortly. But coming up, it's time for the debate this hour. I will ask, should the next Prime Minister scrap smart motorways? I'm sick to the hind teeth of smart motorways. They're not smart, they're stupid, OK? Rishi Sunak has said that he'll put the brakes on, see what we did there, controversial traffic management systems, if he gets the keys to number 10. We will debate that next. We'll be back in just a tick. Don't go anywhere.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back, everybody. Now, the Duchess of Sussex has been joined by tennis champion and very, very, very close friend Serena Williams for the first episode of her new podcast, Archetypes. Now, the pair discuss the double standards that women face when they are labelled ambitious and the struggles that they have faced being new mothers. Grief. The Duchess also shared how she was forced to continue with royal engagements on a tour of South Africa, despite being left in tears when, it says it, her son Archie narrowly escaped a fire in his bedroom. Well, he wasn't in his bedroom at the time, so it's just a fire then, isn't it, really? But there we go. Royal commentator and biographer Angela Levin joins me in the studio. We've decided to keep Kelvin McKenzie in as well, so this one's going to kick off. Angela, what did you make of Meghan Markle's latest vanity project?
Well, I forced myself to read, to listen, to hear every single word of this first podcast. And I was completely shocked that you had about 24 directors. It's taken 20 months to do it. And they thought that the best way to encourage people to listen was to do something that is incredibly old. We've heard it 1,000 times. And that was to talk about her when she was 11. And she wrote and said to the cornflake people that about washing up, you can't just say women, you've got to say people. She was one of thousands, it turns out. And Hillary Clinton, who she said responded, has not actually agreed that she did respond. So there we have a flop for the first time. Yeah. And then you go on from there to hear her, how she spoke when she was 11, extracts. It was so badly chosen that it was astonishing. But what is very interesting, actually, that I felt that she was incredibly out of date. I don't think women have a terribly hard time. Some women do, some women don't. But I don't think you get every man trying to stop you being ambitious, as that was her favourite word in the podcast. Yeah. Some men don't like women, but a lot of women don't like men. So I don't think we're needing for that. I don't think we need that anymore. It's ludicrous. And I just felt that she also only thought of me. And that she didn't have a view. What she said afterwards in a very short interview was that I'm so pleased you're here because you can see the real me, and not through a press lens, right? Well, actually, I thought she did herself a huge disservice because you really saw that she is just focused on herself. She tried to hang on to her friend, very good, very dear friend.
Oh, great, best friends.
Yes,
best
and
friends.
they
Go
were
way back.
They were giggling, and oh my gosh.
Nothing was
and
funny
you think,
about it.
It was nothing funny, and she wanted her to grumble and moan about how life is. She wants to be a victim in part. She wants to knock the royal family from here to the other side of the world and back. And I just think it's just outrageous and very sad, because she could have done a lot of good here, and instead of which she's smashed it up.
Talking about doing good and actually doing good are two very, very different things, aren't they? And we touched on it a bit earlier, Kelvin. 10 seconds on this, by the way. I think actually it's almost not worth asking you. But in fact, I won't ask you because we haven't got time. I'm being shouted at here, but thank you very much. Anyway,
good point,
I was
though,
going
good
to
point.
say, you were about to make one of the best points ever heard on national television.
Well done.
And well done, OK? Well done
Nicely
for that,
put,
Angela.
nicely put, Angela.
That point you made right at the end there was fantastic. Angela Levin, thank you very, very much. Great to have you on the show. There we go. Well, the reason I'm doing this is because you're being biffed off, Angela, for smart motorways. That's right. Smart motorways have been... The debate has been reignited as Rishi Sunak has pledged to ban new ones if he becomes Prime Minister. He called smart motorways unsafe and said that his government would, quote, stop the war on motorists once and for all. So, yes, I'm asking, should the next Prime Minister scrap smart motorways? I'm joined, very briefly, by former roads policing officer Mike Rawson, and, of course, as well, we've got motoring journalist Danny Kelly. I'll start with you, Mike, former roads policing officer. Mike, I spent a lot of time on smart motorways, easy for me to say, in recent days. I just think they're a dangerous menace. Where's the hard shoulder?
Well, exactly, Patrick. They are a menace and they're dangerous. And we've lost an awful lot of people due to the absence of that hard shoulder. And whilst I welcome Mr. Sunak saying he won't build any more because they're unsafe, surely he should be saying the present ones, therefore, are unsafe and we must add the hard shoulder.
OK. Danny, I'll bring you in now. Danny Kelly, motoring journalist. Look, wouldn't we be better being honest with people and going, really, what we need to do is build another lane, but we can't do that because it's the green belt, so we're just stuck with this, as opposed to pretending that they're great?
Well, I'm going to disagree with you both, and I think they are great. The National Highways actually state that they're safer than a 3-lane running motorway. One can only assume that if there are 4 lanes, that there are fewer serious accidents. At the end of September, they're going to introduce technology that will be able to buzz the headquarters to say that a car has broken down. They're throwing hundreds of millions at extra signage and punitive measures as well for people who actually drive under the Red Cross. So I drove up to Liverpool yesterday, probably 15 minutes quicker than I would have done had it not indeed been a 3-lane motorway. Of course, it's easy for Rishi Sunak to throw some red meat. And I didn't realise red meat would be smart motorways. I get the tax reduction, I get all of that. But I don't understand why 160,000 Tory members are going to be thrilled by this.
Just quickly, I'm going to have about 30 seconds with the both of you now, I'm afraid. I'm going to go with you, Mike, actually, just begin with. Do you feel less safe on smart motorways when they're saying, if you blow a tyre on the M1, just go left? Or what if there's a massive Polish lorry ploughing through that lane?
I do feel safe, not just because I might break down, but somebody in front of me may break down. If it happens at night, people's judgment of vehicles is very different. They cannot think vehicle.
All right, your line's a bit bad, which means
they do realise it stopped, it's too late.
Yeah, there you go. OK, good stuff. Danny, I'll just throw it back to you. Do you realistically trust the fact that the technology needed to keep smart motorways safe is going to work? We're already hearing about them having to point cameras up at the sun because they're fogging up too much.
Well, yes, I can only put my trust in the people who create technology. But you know what, Patrick, you hit on something there. The amount of times I've driven past a smart motorway and it's in English saying stick to the left, we must accept that probably 35, 40% of the people on the road probably don't even speak or understand written English.
It's an interesting point, actually. Look, both of you, sorry, short and sweet. You know how the news is sometimes. It rolls on and on and on and gets away from us. But thank you very much. We'll get you back on, no doubt, for this debate the next time something kicks off on a smart motorway. That was, of course, former roads policing officer Mike Rawson and motoring journalist Danny Kelly. Where do you stand on that? Always a hot topic, the old smart motorways. But I'd like to say thank you very much to Kelvin McKenzie as well, who's been joining me throughout the show. Up next, it's Jubes & Co. with Michelle Dewberry, who's right here in the studio. Michelle, great to see you. What you got for us?
Great to see you too as well. Welcome back,
Thank you very much.
Patrick. Well, tonight we are going to be following on from our lead topic yesterday, which was law and order in Britain. Put frankly, it's broken. So I'm going to focus on it for the whole of my show tonight. Police by consent. Is that method working? Do we need to be tougher? Say, perhaps like the States, for example. What's going on with the whole gang thing in this country? Do we do enough to support youths? Yes or no? So we'll be getting into all of that with David Starkey and Lisa McKenzie in just a couple of minutes.
Yeah, Michelle, that's absolutely spot on. Thank you very, very much for that. It's going to be a bumper show that really on the pulse of what's going on in this country, all over the country. And that, ladies and gents, is why we are the People's Channel. Make sure you tune into Jubes & Co. That's all we've got time for today. You've been with me, Patrick Christie's, covering, of course, for Colin Brazier for the rest of the week. I'm back on at 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. Up next, it is Jubes & Co. I tell you what, I've been away for a month. I've missed you very, very badly, and it's great to be back. See you soon.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. It's another hot and humid day in the southeast, cloudier and cooler elsewhere, with some rain. Most of that rain falling close to a weather front which splits the country in two at the moment. It divides the hot and humid conditions that we're seeing across East Anglia and the southeast from the much fresher air that's arriving into the north and west of the UK. And for the Midlands into Wales and the southwest, some heavier and more persistent rain for a time during the evening, close to that weather front. Some lively showers developing perhaps in the North Midlands, pushing up into parts of Yorkshire overnight. And then by dawn, attention turns to the southeast, where some thundery rain turns up. And it's warm overnight here, 21 Celsius in the far southeast, whilst a cooler feel for Scotland, Northern Ireland, western parts of England and Wales, with clearer spells expected. But the wet weather in the southeast continues during the morning. Could be some tricky conditions on the roads for a time before eventually it eases away. Some useful wet weather, of course. We do need the rain in the southeast. Further showers follow, but eventually brighter skies. And for many, it's a fine afternoon. Temperatures closer to average, a fresher feel, but a breeze there for western Scotland and